petty offenses?
I have it all broken down. And, you know, for the matter of time and not to bore people, I'll just get into the 7 majors. The UCR index is what we're talking about today, the victims that I just described. So like you said, when you look at non-bail eligible felonies, not talking about anything but felonies, we've identified 482 people who have been arrested 846 times. Out of the 846 times they've been arrested, almost 35% of the time, 299 of the 7 majors, compared to 109 7 majors last year. So that's an increase of approximately 207 majors, which again, we're talking about victims. So it's almost 3 times more an increase of arrests with an agency that is down almost 7,000 arrests.
Mike, all of those statistics are occurring this year?
Everything is this year. So I just want to explain to the room. Your initial arrest has to be for a non-bail eligible felony, and you have to commit the crime after your initial arrest, which means within 59 days, we have seen them we have seen them arrested 846 times, 299 times for 7 majors. Recidivism only grows with time. So can you imagine where we'll be in 6 months from now?
Are we still the safest big city in America? I noticed the sign's no longer here.
Yes, we are.
We must be repainting it. We absolutely are. Absolutely.
By a lot.
Rocco?
For Chief LaPetri, Chief, what is the 109 number for last year? What does that correspond to?
That's 7 majors also.
Which body of people?
Same, apples to apples. This is apples to apples. This is done by my office, by my crime analysis team, my data scientists, and that is we are comparing the same procedure, the same data is compared to January 1st to February 28th, 2019 to 2020. Again, we have the specific charges that we've put into our program. Those all meet the not eligible for bail, but you have to be arrested for a felony. So we are not including misdemeanors, and then that person has to reoffend for a crime after. So if you committed a crime in December, 5 robberies, and you get arrested after initial arrest, it doesn't count. These are people who reoffend this year.
You mean those arrested in the first 2 months of last year for one of the 7 majors reoffended 109 times last year, correct?
Not reoffended, were arrested, with us making 7,000 more arrests at that time.
DP numbers, don't you mean deferred prosecution, or do you mean declined prosecution?
So when we capture declined prosecutions, we also include deferred. Why is that? Because as real time, you are not being prosecuted for that crime. And it's up to the DA's office, working with us to see if we're going to go back and make that arrest. So I'm going to, since you asked the question, I'll get into it. So again, non-bail eligible felony arrests this year, for the first 59, 58 days of the year, there have been 803 declined or deferred prosecutions compared to 527 last year. So we're at 11% rate this year compared to a 7% rate last year. So the question comes, why is that? Very quickly.
Mike, can you just cite, too, the Berg example from, I think it was yesterday or the day before?
Sure. So last night, we arrested an individual who was being charged with 25 burglaries. And again, if that person is not arrested, or we don't have any other evidence to see if possibly they were armed with a firearm, which would make it a Berg 1, it's an aggravating factor, basically, to rise the level to get bail for a burglary with the new criminal justice reform. So yesterday, we charged an individual with 25 burglaries. The issue with that is, when it comes to pattern burglars or pattern robberies, subject matter is relevant, which means discovery is relevant. So if you get charged with 25 burgs, number 25 or number 1 is subject matter that's irrelevant, which means discovery has to be turned over immediately within the 15-day window. That is basically impossible to do. So working with the DA's office, a lot of these additional non-bail eligible felonies are being deferred. And we will continue to work with the DA's office for them to be charged. But the individual we were talking about, 18 of those cases were deferred. We did work with the DA's office prior to. That's why he was able to be charged with 6. But he is walking around since approximately 1 o'clock yesterday morning in the streets of New York.
I'm going to cut in a second, and as you can see, this gets really deep into the weeds, but all of those deferrals, and Rocco, I would say to you, it may not be, in layman's terms, I would describe it as declined prosecution and deferred is oftentimes used interchangeably. It's not necessarily so, but it is often used interchangeably. All those deferred arrests that we see growing significantly this year, it's tied to discovery, is not then showing up in Mike's earlier stats about recidivism. So there's many layers to this, but I think that we could probably spend 6 hours and probably not hit many of the other topics. So I'm going to, I mean, if we have real specifics, we'll try to answer it, but maybe we'll do a second forum outside of this or something.
Chief, and then for yourself. So, Chief, of that number, 803, how many, I mean, deferred prosecution is one thing. Declined prosecution suggests the DA feels you don't have a case. So what number is declined prosecution?
Again, those are used interchangeably.
Yes.
They really are. We're declining it at this point in time, and we will resurrect it at a later point. And what we're seeing this year, definitively, is a significant increase in those as a response to the discovery issues.
And just, Rocco, just one last thing. If you get charged with 5 burgs, third degree, or 1, it's the same. It is the same as far as you are not eligible to get bail.
Yeah.
Now, there are aggravating factors. Very, very funny.
So from a prosecutor standpoint, that makes sense. You know, it's a strategy. If I have to release the person today, why go through all the others? We can make that determination down the road. What we're saying is, though, that affects the arrest rates and the recidivism rates because they're not showing up yet. Next question? No, you can't. Next.
I would welcome a separate forum for those questions.
That would be very smart.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about hate crimes, anti-black hate crimes, which you flagged yesterday also. Has had a large increase, and what is other? I don't know if you know what's driving that.
The other is when you have multiples. So rather than parse them separately out, believe it or not, it's not a big number, but you may have occurrences where somebody spray paints something on the wall, and it's against multiple protected classes.
Hate crimes?
Chief Harrison.
So if I just give you a rundown of all the hate crimes for the year to date, we're actually down 63 versus 65. I know a big concern in 2019 were the anti-Semitic. We're actually down with the anti-Semitic this year, 35 versus 41. Sexual orientation, we're down 4 versus 6. But yes, there is a spike in anti-black hate crimes. And if I could just give you a quick breakdown regarding the crimes, we have 3 for the year to date being aggravated harassment 1, 3 for the year to date being aggravated harassment 2, and 4 for the year to date being criminal mischief 4. So what we're seeing is a lot of graffiti being displayed around the city. I shouldn't say a lot, because it's small numbers, by the way, with the N-word being utilized incorrectly.
In the back.
How many of those 299 arrests were either for murder or rape, if any?
Well, you mean the initial? The initial would not fit.
Right.
into non-bail
No, the
eligible.
subsequent.
None of them, because those would be,
You mean the afters? Yes, I do have, the breakdown. So they have been rearrested after their initial arrest 99 times for robbery, 79 times for burglary, 65 times for grand larceny, 28 times for grand larceny of an auto, 27 times for felonious assault, and 1 time for murder.
Juliet?
Chief, you said you imagine what's going to happen 6 months from now. What will be happening 6 months from now, and what needs to change so that this doesn't happen 6 months from now?
I mean, look, when...
Can I just
we-
jump in? No, just a sec, Chief. That's a question over here. We have made very, very clear that we need help from Albany, and we expect help from Albany. Conversations have been very, very productive. You've seen the statement from the governor. You've seen the actions of the state senate. I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that there will be change on April 1st, and that's what we need.
And with that as the backdrop, we also don't wait. I mean, you saw the officer a moment ago. All across New York City every day, officers are out there keeping New Yorkers safe, and we'll continue to. We will adjust, as I said. We'll redeploy, and maybe quite significantly as we're working through our plans going forward in terms of putting more officers out on the street into the places where we see most people being victimized. So people in New York City, as always, I think I hit, whether it's churches or community meetings, they let us know when we're doing well, and they let us know when they need more assistance. And, I was out in Queens last week at a town hall meeting, and some of the store owners brought up concerns. But we will be out there to keep New Yorkers safe. That's the message.
This, but what's the year-to-date change in index crimes percentage-wise?
It's about 21% as we sit here. Ashley?
This question is for, thank you. This question is for Chief LaPetrie. The messaging from the top has been that the bail reform people are getting out who are then going and reoffending. But when Rocco asked you just now about the 109, you said that those were rearrests, not necessarily reoffenses. So I'd like it if you could clarify if these people are getting out and committing new offenses, or are you all arresting them for things that they were wanted on earlier?
I think I'll let Mike speak for himself. I think what he's going to tell you is it is undercounted because they are offending more. These are merely the arrests. But Mike?
Again, thank you, Commissioner. These are rearrests after the initial arrest. So even if the offense, because we used a formula where we use occurrence from to, which means the occurrence cannot be before 1/1 to get onto this data. All right, so it is done by the right people, and I am very, very confident in the data that I am sharing today. It is empirical, and this is, again, arrested after your initial arrest for a non-bail eligible felony. Those individuals have been arrested for 299 7 majors, compared to 109 7 majors last year, at the same time, with the same group of people, using the same procedure.
Right, and what I'm asking you, are these offenses that they have committed since their release, or are these older offenses that you're
No,
arresting?
nothing is older. This is, every offense is committed after their initial arrest from January 1st.
And we also, I think it would be really helpful, Commissioner, if we could take all this information, put out in writing, online, whatever, so all the folks here can understand the nuances and ask questions off of very specific data.
Yeah, I'm looking at Devore, and Devore can quarterback that.
Follow-up to that question for the commissioner and perhaps the mayor is, are you saying here that, so let me back up. So the Legal Aid Society and other public defenders have come out and saying that they've noted a significant drop in the cases docketed, and that differs from the complaints. Arrests, according to your own numbers, are pretty much steady or rising slightly. How do you explain the difference between the gap between arrests on new cases and the cases that are currently underway through the criminal justice system? You're saying
Ashley, let me just if I could, I saw that tweet, and I was a little dumbfounded when I seen it. As a student of this for many, many years, I honestly believe, and this is what I believe, that they lost a lot of credibility. I don't know why they put that tweet out. It really makes no sense. And I can't say it any simpler than that. They lost credibility with people that have any knowledge of the criminal justice system in terms of clearly the crimes are occurring. I mean, we have victims every day that we're seeing. And to match up what they said really does not make sense.
The gap, because it's still there.
Which gaps?
Between docketed cases and the new arrests.
How do you explain that to the victims?
You have arrests coming into the system, many of which are getting deferred at a much higher rate because of the discovery issues with the bail. You also have, out of that picture, a pipeline feeding. As you keep moving down the pipeline, now you have a whole series of arrests that, mandated by law, brand new, as of 2 months ago, must be desk appearance ticket issued. Those numbers have grown. I think it's roughly 60-something to over 800 this year. So as this pipeline is feeding, you have deferrals growing at a high rate. You have desk appearance tickets at a high rate. And the pipeline continues to go smaller and smaller. And now you have the arrests that remain in that pipeline, and now you have them being fed out. They must be released without bail.
And just to get,
And not every arrest, not every crime is resulting in arrest. They are well aware of that. That was a, you know, I'm incredulous at that tweet.
To that as well, it's a pretty serious accusation.
When you say pretty serious accusation, what are you saying?
They're being manipulated.
That what, I'm sorry?
The crime stats are being manipulated.
It's not the first time we've seen different organizations out there attempt to make that charge. I find it, and by the way, to be provocative, I remember once upon a time when the police commissioner under Michael Bloomberg attempted to make that charge about some of our statistics. Do you remember that? Right. They're wrong. It's a game. They're wrong. When people try, this is such a meticulous organization, it's being transparent. When people have an axe to grind from right or left and they attempt to go at the stats, I just don't buy it. Let's talk about what is tangibly happening before our eyes. It's very striking. We know what we have to do about it. Let's fix it.
Both Commissioner and Mayor, I wanted to ask about hate crimes against Asians. I think a lot of Asian American leaders in the cities have voiced concerns that there will be a rise in xenophobia due to the coronavirus, but the stats show 0 hate crimes directed at Asians. Do you think there are really no hate crimes? Are you concerned they're just not being reported?
I want to start on this. Look, I'm always concerned about reporting. I think there's a number of areas, and hate crimes are one of them, where it stands to reason we're not hearing everything we need to know, and we want to. And again, this is this kind of, it may seem counterintuitive, and I want to give the NYPD a lot of credit. We have been begging for years and years, please tell us, whatever it is. You know, we know for a long time domestic violence was underreported. We know sexual violence has been underreported. We know hate crimes has been underreported. We want all reporting. It's absolutely crucial to stop these crimes, to get those facts. So please help us appeal to everyone to come forward. But I would say we undoubtedly are seeing discrimination towards the Asian communities, and we're trying to use every tool we can to stop it. And I want to emphasize right now to all New Yorkers, it is absolutely unacceptable to discriminate against Asian individuals and Asian communities in the midst of this crisis. And by the way, in case you hadn't been paying attention, this crisis now is extended all over the world, and we're unfortunately experiencing community transmission, and we're experiencing cases from countries outside of Asia. So not only is the discrimination immoral, it's inaccurate. But in general, I would say, thank God we're not seeing more serious incidents, and if anyone knows of one, we need to hear about it right away.
So,
Before we go to coronavirus any further, can you go back on topic?
No, hold on. I just want to clarify, because we're going to be doing coronavirus separately later on, so that was just, I should have, you were right to flag it. I should have flagged it. My bad. Just want to make sure everyone understands we're going to do all the police matters, I'm going to do non-coronavirus, new category, non-coronavirus off topic. And then we're going to break for a few minutes to get the latest updates. We'll come back and do just coronavirus. So, thank you.
Is the NYPD or other city agencies taking extra steps regarding possible hate crimes against Asian communities?
I'll start it. I'll turn it over to Rodney. For example, we were made aware of a social media post yesterday that appears to be in New York City Transit. That's been flagged over to Chief Harrison for the Hate Crimes Task Force to look at. But, you know, Rodney recounted the details earlier that we are down in overall hate crimes. We're down in anti-Semitic crimes and some other categories. But it's still too high. I mean, when you see hate crimes occurring, it's too high. We do have significant amount of resources, roughly 25 people of different ranks in our hate crimes task force. We think that they are readily available to muster up to combat this, but Rodney can speak to that specific incident that we just were made aware of.
So first, if you don't mind, Commissioner, I just want to echo the words of the mayor. Yes, absolutely, we want people to report it, and I'm not sure if we're getting an accurate amount of incidents and I think it's underreported, to be honest. But yesterday morning, about 9 o'clock on the inline train by the 8th Avenue in the 6-8 precinct, there was an individual who was standing next to a Asian individual and started spraying Febreze around his feet and around him. We did receive a 911 call for an emotionally disturbed person. Upon our arrival, I was on the train. The train was no longer there, so we were unable to take a report. We received a social media post. We are investigating right now. Our hate crimes task force is reviewing the incident, and it's an ongoing investigation.
Is the mayor's office for the prevention of hate crimes doing anything specifically on potential anti-Asian xenophobia right now?
That's what they do, and we'll get you the details.
Rich in the back, I didn't forget you.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor and Mr. Commissioner, about the bail reform issue, I'm just looking for some simple declarative sentences of what it is you're seeing before your eyes, to quote the mayor. I mean, I understand it's a delicate issue, you're talking to Albany, but what's happening here? In the simplest terms, without numbers, if you will, what are you seeing?
We're seeing a major increase in property crimes in particular. And I'm the first to say there's never only one factor to anything, but there's a direct correlation to the change in the law, and we need to address it, and we will address it. I'm absolutely confident that this will be addressed on April 1st.
Tony?
Follow up on the bail issue, but one more time. Yesterday you had mentioned that you wanted to empower the judiciary, which seems to be out of the picture now.
To empower who?
Judiciary.
Yeah.
What would you like the judges to be able to do with some sort of change in the bail reform situation? What would you like them to do?
I don't remember saying that yesterday, but I probably did, and I've said it before. I mean, it comes down to that issue of mandatory release versus discretion for the judges. So, I mean, I would pose to you, take a look at what happens inside a courtroom. That courtroom is controlled in, I would say, almost every sense of the word by the judges. They make determinations on law, on case law. They make determinations on what evidence is allowed in that case. They make determinations on what witnesses and what's relevant for the jury to be heard. When a case is tried and there's a guilty verdict, they make determinations on what the sentence is going to be. Is that person going to jail for 3 years or for probation or 30 years? Every aspect of that room is controlled by the judge. To have it now that we don't trust judges to make a determination in very small cases on pre-trial sentencing, I think is a little off there. I think there's, again, every time I've talked about bail reform, I've said the same thing. I think it was well-intentioned. I think it was very good aspects accomplished, and I think that can be retained with just a couple small fixes. And then we will have what everyone wants. fare system with public safety.
Mr. Mayor, you're pretty attuned to what's going on in the state capital. What changes do you see as being the most possible up in Albany? I mean, seeing you're expecting something to happen on April 1st, it's April Fool's Day.
Despite your profound observation of the calendar. One might ask, to be fair, why long ago in Albany they decided that the budget day would be April 1st. One might have asked, couldn't you have chosen a different day? But it has always been April 1st, for as long as I can remember. I am a believer in judicial discretion. I believe that is the single best way to address these issues. Obviously, the state Senate agrees, given what they put out as a proposal. That is not the end of the discussion. There's a lot more that has to be done. I will always tell you when I feel I am an expert on something or not. I am not an expert on the topic of what's going on in New Jersey, but from what I have heard, their model has been very effective, which focuses on judicial discretion, while, as the commissioner said, rightfully addressing the historic problems with bail and achieving that reform. So I think that's a real interesting model I hope everyone in Albany will be looking at, but I also would be the first to say there's more than one way to solve this problem, or more than one combination of changes that might solve the problem. Obviously, in a process that involves Assembly, Senate, Governor, there's going to be some back and forth, but the level of focus, the level of agreement on the need to do something, I think, gets stronger by the day.
So we'll open it up now to police questions off this topic if anyone wishes.
Ford from Pixel Evidence. Can you talk about this shooting at 163rd Street between Amsterdam and Edgecombe? Thank you.
Obviously, it's a very ongoing situation. There was a dispute going on in the building. Some people came out, started throwing rocks up towards a particular apartment that they've had this dispute with. At some point, a shot was fired out of that apartment, striking a male in the face. It looked like it was small rounds that came out from maybe a shotgun. A possible shot was fired back towards the apartment. We currently have 4 people in the station house, and the investigation's continuing.
Did they shoot at members of service at all?
No.
President Trump announced this morning that he'll start withholding funding to sanctuary cities who don't cooperate with ICE. I'm wondering if you've heard anything about that, what your response is, and if you have an estimate of how much money is at stake for New York.
1, we'll see him in court. 2, the Supreme Court decision, we said this a couple of years ago when this first started, the original executive order on immigration came out. The Supreme Court decision that makes clear that it's not appropriate was written by Justice Roberts, I believe it was 2012. So we still believe that it's unconstitutional for the federal government to withhold security funding for a locality based on a policy disagreement. And that still needs to be further adjudicated in court, and we'll see him in court. The amount of money, I want to check my facts. I believe it's single-digit millions, but we will. You may know offhand.
I don't know offhand. That this was discussed at length yesterday at the budget hearing on new deputy commissioner management and budget. And you know, obviously, we would be concerned, but we will continue to work to resolve this in any way possible, because we rely on those funds for the safety of all New Yorkers.
So can you give us an update on the status of the 5 police officers who are quarantined, and then also have more been quarantined?
Currently, there's 4 police officers quarantined. None of them are symptomatic at this point in time.
Real quick, what will the NYPD do about people who don't want to be quarantined?
We're going to speak to that later on in the press conference. Here to help.
For the Commissioner. Commissioner, on Staten Island, there's a group of local residents who are putting up yellow ribbons around the locations of speed cameras to help drivers know where the cameras are, so that the drivers would slow down temporarily in the area where the yellow ribbon is, but then drive faster, perhaps even recklessly, all over the island where there aren't yellow ribbons. Just love to know what your comment would be on what you think of that as a law enforcement official. And also, a follow-up would be simply, what could the NYPD do? Is that some sort of obstruction of governmental operations, perhaps?
I had not heard that, so thank you for bringing that to my attention, but the speed with which Chief Morris came up tells me that he had heard of it, and I'll tell you, you know, anything that makes our methods to keep New Yorkers safe, I would be concerned about. And sometimes it's not that high tech. It could be taking it down. But I had not heard of that. I'll have a conversation with Billy. Billy, you're aware of it?
I'm Chief Morris. I'm Chief of Transportation. I've seen the articles in the media about it and some of the pictures regarding it. Currently, there are about 600 speed cameras deployed throughout the city. We have always supported them. Anything that addresses dangerous driving behavior, anything that gets it to stop, is something that we encourage. It's interesting to note there were 221 fatal collisions last year in the city. According to the investigations conducted by our Collision Investigation Squad, 28 of them involved speed. So speed is clearly an issue here. Anything that gets dangerous driving behavior to stop, we would encourage. At the same time, on an absolute look at the law, posting signs on city property is clearly improper and illegal. However, there is some confusion here with these yellow ribbons. It's well known that yellow ribbons are used to commemorate military service and to commemorate folks who have passed in traffic collisions. So at this point, we're not prepared to take action on the yellow ribbons specifically. But again, I would put out there, anything that deters dangerous driving behavior is something that this agency would support.
Your language of what you just said suggests that you support the yellow ribbons because at least on those blocks, the drivers would be going slower, even though on other blocks where there's no ribbon, they could go whatever speed they choose.
I don't believe that's what I said. I think I addressed the yellow ribbon specifically saying at this point we're not prepared to take action against them, given their dual statements that they're used for.
But really, and I said this the other day at the Brooklyn Borough President's office when we had many religious leaders in and had great conversations again with the community. This topic came up, not about Staten Island, but about the terrible incidents from a week ago in Brooklyn, where we lost 2 very young children. It's incumbent upon everyone. Billy mentioned the speeding, and I would add inattentiveness to that. And anything that we can do from the police department standpoint, working with our partners, whether it's speed enforcement, whether it's increased deployment, whether it's handing out flyers to remind people of the dangers, particularly around schools. That was just awful, what happened. Rocco, this isn't the same question, is it? Okay.
Just for yourself, or maybe Chief Monahan or Chief Pichardo, an incident last night captured on video, I guess it's in Canarsie in the 6-9.
Yeah.
2 men in the park smoking marijuana, a subsequent arrest with an allegation of excessive force. Have you seen the video? What is your assessment?
Yeah, I'll walk you through what I know at this point in time. I mean, it happened yesterday, but at the end of the story, the short answer is I'm going to look for an investigation just to make sure I know everything that happened here. But here's the facts as I know them now. Yesterday afternoon in the 6-9, we had a shot spotter alert indicating shots fired. Several blocks away from that, I believe 2, but you can tell it's preliminary because I'm not positive. 2 officers, I think, encountered 2 males in a park. As they approached them, they believe they're smoking marijuana. As they go to interact with them, again, they just had these shots fired in the area. The 2 males immediately take off running in different directions. What you see on that video is one of the 2 males as he's apprehended by one of the officers. The other male was also apprehended. I don't know how far away at this point. He wound up being issued a summons and released. The individual that is depicted on the video, you see a plainclothes police officer radioing for assistance, and then after a short period of time, you also see somebody videoing. You hear the male having a very distinct conversation with the officer. Why are you stopping me? Things of that nature. As backup officers respond to the scene, The male is taken to the ground. He is subsequently brought in, charged with, I believe, possession of marijuana, resisting arrest, and unlawful or obstruction of governmental administration, released on a desk appearance ticket. So you have one summoned, you have one arrested and released before seeing a judge. I took a look at the pictures of the individual. As I know it at this time, he had abrasions to his knee. That could change, but that's what I believe to be accurate at this point in time. I did see pictures of him from the neck up. I didn't see any injuries. Some disturbing points, Rocco, to the video. I'm going to ask, where's Fausto? Fausto's here on my right to take a look at the entire incident. Above all else, there's one point in time where you see, as there's a scrum, if you will, of officers, you see somebody standing on what I believe to be the, I think the ages of the two young men were 20 and 18. One of the men, his ankle. And that's where we have it at this point in time. You know, certainly, you look at the totality. It's interesting that we had, you know, the totality of the incident from the beginning in two very separate outcomes. I would like to even see a third outcome. I would like to see approach, discussion, and no running, no physical resistance at all, no arrest need. You know, I guess Terry and I have known each other a long time. Ben, Fausto. The problem is you can't go back in time, and this is what we have now. This speaks to the heart of what I've been talking about for many weeks, probably months now, in terms of juveniles. You know, at this point in time, I have nothing to indicate that they were in any way tied to the ShotSpotter incident, but I certainly don't know that the officers didn't know that as they were arriving on that scene. And when you have two people take off running, I've been in that situation myself, and you don't know what you have. I think we just saw that with the officer in the Bronx that we started today's event with. So we'll have to take a look at the entirety of it. The end is what concerns me. I'd love to have a different outcome where we wind up on the ground wrestling with somebody. But if we can learn something from it, whether there's, I'm not aware of a complaint that's been made regarding this incident, but certainly we'll have to take a look at beginning to end, any retraining needed, or any other, you know, issues that may come up in the investigation. Fausto, anything?
Nope. Well said, Commissioner.
One more question, and then we'll be set for the mayor. Yes.
Thank you. Just going back to judicial discretion, last weekend or last Friday, a special narcotics prosecutor was charged with attempted murder after shooting up a Williamsburg bar, but he was released without bail, even though it was a bail-eligible offense. I'm just wondering, just to get you on the record, is that a good use of judicial discretion? Should a special narcotics officer be released without bail?
Yeah, I did not see, I saw the story. I don't know the facts intimately. This is a private investigator that works for Special Narcotics Part. Am I accurate on that?
His employment, but he was called a special narcotics prosecutor. But the point was, it was a bail-eligible offense, and he was released.
If there's a shots fired in a bar, I'd like to see all the facts. I would always like to see the judges have discretion in a situation like this. Look at the individual before them, look at the history, look at the facts of this case, and somebody dangerous needs to be kept off the street.
That might be problematic in terms of how we're deeming who is dangerous and who is not dangerous.
I think that's a fair question.
Yeah,
I also think we have to be able to trust judges.
Yeah, but I think it's a very fair question. I think the important point is to craft an approach that comes with real checks and balances and guidelines. I don't want to go back to the bad old days. I don't want to have a situation where someone is discriminatory, that they just get to do whatever the heck they want. What I want is, and again, I have felt this long before the current law, that remember, our system is predicated on the question of flight risk. That's a really blunt instrument. It's a really inappropriate, in my view, way to think about all the considerations that we have to think about. The first question is, how do we keep people safe? So what I want is a judge to be able, with criteria, with checks and balances, to determine if someone might pose a threat, they have the opportunity to hold them in. The case you indicate, to me, as a layman, not knowing all the facts, I'd say that's someone you'd hold in. regardless of who they are, regardless of background, et cetera. But I think what we'll find some, what's the word I'm looking for, where I think we can find some consensus in Albany is the notion of, yes, there's a virtue to discretion, but it must come with clear standards, checks, and balances.
Thank you. We're going to reset for the mayor now, and we'll be right back up.
So we're going to keep a few of you. We got the door. Shut the door.
Hey, everybody, are we getting ready for the mayor now?
A personal. John, that is a personal statement. You are very personal. Okay, again, I'm going to say it in the interest of clarity. If your question has anything to do with coronavirus, hold it, because we're going to take a break after the general off-topic. I need to get a few more updates, and then we'll come back and do coronavirus. So non-coronavirus, go.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, with recent incidents in Bronx politics, I have been told that State Senator Luis Sepulveda may, and I have to put it that way, may be wired. Mayor de Blasio, you were investigated by the U.S. Attorney's Office 2 years ago, with the U.S. Attorney saying that they did not have enough evidence.
You really.
The U.S. Attorney who investigated you was then fired.
My friend, I don't know where you're going, but it sounds rather obscure.
Was he asking you questions that might be used by the U.S. Attorney, and has the U.S. Attorney called you in for any...
Everything you're saying is outrageous. No to everything. Let it go.
Mr. Mayor, about the video that the commissioner was asked about, the arrest in Canarsie.
Yes.
Have you seen that video
Yes.
also, and what are your thoughts on it?
I agree with everything the commissioner said. I mean, look, I don't like what I saw, obviously. It's not what we're trying to do here. We don't have all the facts. We need a full investigation. But I do want, look, we're going to have a more serious conversation in this city that is not just, it's one thing or another. The fact is, I don't want any officer to stand on someone's leg if they don't have to. I want more communication between officers and people that they are confronting. That's everything that we've been training. I want to see situations like this handled better. That said, I want everyone to remember, which was not necessarily part of the original narrative, that there's a shots fired situation, which means put yourself in the officer's shoes. If you've got shots fired nearby and you've got people who run from you, which indicates something's wrong, and you're not sure if they have a weapon or not, I don't blame an officer for being concerned. I also want to say everything would be made better if people would not run when the police walk up to them, but communicate with the police. And if a police officer tells you that you're under arrest, comply. But that being said, where we need to get to is a situation where you never see an incident like that, where people know that there's the right kind of communication and the right kind of de-escalation. So that's where I want to see us go. Yes.
I want to ask about semi-Bernie, semi-coronavirus related to...
Okay, you're not going to get the coronavirus in.
It's a gray area.
Yeah, you've already fouled once. Come on. If it's coronavirus, we're going to hold it. Just talk about Bernie.
So it's Medicare for All and Bernie Sanders, but you said the coronavirus is evidence why we need Medicare for all. Our current system will cut it, we need change now, and Bernie Sanders. So I've started to hear some criticism that you're politicizing the coronavirus.
Oh, please.
What would be your response to that?
My response, I'll talk about coronavirus later. My response and the broad point is, there are so many reasons why a universal health care system would advantage us. But in a world where we're facing increasing globalized health threats, it is abundantly clear our current health system is inadequate. That's what I'm saying.
Back from campaigning for Bernie while the city is
No,
going through this kind of crisis.
Don't even try. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, a couple of weeks ago, the Times published a story on Tyler Lockett and a rape investigation of an NYU student, and you were asked about it this week on Brian Lair. I just wanted to get straight from you. Do you think that this case was appropriately handled, and are you comfortable with having that detective in SPD? And I'd also like the commissioner and the chief of detectives to answer as well.
So again, I appreciate the question. Look, whenever I don't have all the facts about a case, I'm going to tell you that, and I'm not going to comment in specific. What I feel is, having had the conversation with my colleagues many, many times about the resources and the change of approach that's needed to be effective compared to where we were a few years ago, I'm very confident that my colleagues right here around me know whatever resources they need, they will get for special victims, and that we take the concerns of advocates very seriously, and that we have to have an atmosphere where survivors are believed, listened to, that their needs are acted on, and I believe that is the direction that the department is taking. I can't speak about a specific case, but I want to be really clear. There's few situations that I know of where advocates say we need more resources, and the answer is that you can have whatever is needed, but it has to be interpreted by the police department as the experts. If they need more, they're going to get it. That's the answer everyone should want. That is the answer I've given repeatedly. So these guys tell me they need something more, they're going to get it.
You were briefed on this case, and you also read the story, so I wonder if you can comment specifically on this case.
No, I don't. I want to be careful. I don't think I said I was briefed on the case. I think I said I was briefed on the situation in that part of the NYPD. And again, I think my memory is serving.
I do know the facts of the case, Ashley, so I'll get into it, but I'll just start by saying we are 100% committed to the victims of sexual assaults in this city. I think we've demonstrated that, not only myself, Chief Harrison now, who's replaced me as the Chief of Detectives, Judy Harrison, who's doing a phenomenal job as the leader of the Special Victims Division. We've put in additional executive leadership into special victims. We've put additional headcount into special victims, driving the caseload down. We continue to give the men and women of Special Victims Division what I would consider exceptional training. If there's opportunities to increase that training and improve on it, which there always is, we will certainly look to do that as well. We've met with victims advocates on numerous occasions and taken their sometimes complaints and sometimes discussions to heart and acted upon many of their recommendations. We sit and review anonymized cases together with them, and when you sit and review those cases in anonymized fashion together, they have physically said to me that they were pleased with those cases. That's not to say that we're content. We are always looking to get better. We've also begun to make improvements to special victims facilities in the last, I'll say, year or two, roughly. 137 Center Street, victim-centered approaches. We have done a lot in the area around sexual assault survivors, and we're not going to stop doing more to make that horrific experience better, for lack of a good words. Regarding the Tyler Lockett case, I am intimately familiar with that case, as you know. I have been familiar with it. We have spoken about it in this room. I did read your article. I disagree with significant portions of that interpretation. The facts of the Tyler Lockett case, to insinuate that Tyler Lockett was let go because of the work of the Special Victims Division, is categorically false. I said at this table, probably 2 seats down, months ago, maybe closer to a year ago, Tyler Lockett, who was incarcerated for months and was issued a program and then released into that program, never to show up, my understanding, and then commit multiple sexual assaults, I found extremely disturbing. But to tie it to an earlier case of a sexual assault victim, and I'm referring to the case with the fingerprint hit, is categorically wrong, and I think it's the wrong thing to do on multiple levels, and it's false. You need a complainant to prosecute that crime. There were multiple attempts to work with that victim in a victim-centered approach to bring the victim along to a point where she felt comfortable engaging in the system. And I know what was written in the story, that there was allegations that the officer was unprofessional on the initial encounter. I dispute those facts. We also made multiple attempts to engage and speak to the family of the victim. To this day, the victim will not cooperate in that prosecution, and we respect and honor her decision.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't finished. First, I wanted the chief detective to answer this question. I also wanted you to answer, since you're familiar with this case. Another victim also complained to you about this same detective. Are you comfortable having him in the Special Victims Division? Now you have 2 complaints.
I'm not familiar with another victim coming forward.
She met with you and complained to your face about how he...
I am not familiar with that. Rodney, if you are, you can correct me.
The detective is a first-grade detective. He became first-grade detective because he investigates his cases very, very thoroughly. People don't become first-grade detectives in this police department for getting their supervisor a good cup of coffee or things of that nature. They work very hard. They solve a lot of intricate cases, and they work their behinds off. So I'm not sure about the complaints that were made towards the Detective McLaughlin, I believe his name is, but I have heard nothing but superlatives about his work ethic from his supervisors and from Chief Judy Harrison.
Go ahead, Katie.
This morning on Mika and Joe in the morning, you, whatever it's called, you said something to the effect of low information voters when explaining Biden's win.
No,
I know it kind of went viral on Twitter. Do you want to clarify?
That was one of my colleagues on the panel putting her words into it, and I respect her, but that's not what I said. I said Joe Biden hasn't been vetted, and this is pure fact. A week ago today, people were prepared to write his obituary if he lost South Carolina, political obituary. And what happened in the last few debates? The focus was on Michael Bloomberg. To some extent, the focus is on Bernie Sanders. The focus has not been on Joe Biden. So I'm saying perfectly informed, concerned, active voters got a whole lot of information about other people, didn't get the case raising the concerns about Joe Biden, because that's not how the whole election was proceeding. Joe Biden was losing consistently. Now, with a one-on-one, you're going to get a really intensive examination of Joe Biden. And I think voters of all different backgrounds are going to see a lot more information. I think it's going to affect their thinking. That's what I was trying to say. I think it is a clear reality here. He hit a really perfect moment where he hadn't gotten a lot of examination and critique and scrutiny at the exact moment where he had an opening. And God bless him, that worked for him. But it's going to be a whole different ballgame now.
It aligns with what Sean had began to ask. I mean, this morning, you're on Morning Joe, you announced on this political appearance that there's actually 2 more confirmed cases of
It's not political
coronavirus.
appearance. Again, please. Guys, we're going to be at this for a long time. I'm allowed to say something, Katie. You're going to get to finish your sentence, I assure you. If you say it's a political appearance when the topic was coronavirus, it's just not a political appearance. I'm sorry. Look at the beginning of the show. Continue.
Well, I mean, would you consider maybe, especially if this increases in New York City, would you consider maybe, people see you tweeting from your personal account at all hours of the night about Bloomberg or Biden before there's information from the city's account about coronavirus fears that could actually affect them. Do you think maybe there should be some change there?
No, because we are constantly acting on coronavirus. Every New Yorker can see it. We give updates as soon as we have them, whether it's from me or from others. Meanwhile, an election is happening that's going to determine the fate of the nation and the fate of New York City. I'm sorry, we do not suspend elections in the middle of crises. They go on, and I'm going to be a participant because it matters. But if you are not respectfully, if anyone is missing everything that was being done on coronavirus all the time, and we're briefing you guys all the time, I don't think you're looking very hard. Who else?
I think the concern here is that you went on one show and MK gave a vague reference to 2 new cases. It took your office an hour and a half to give detail on who those cases were, what they were. Why not just announce it to publicly instead of going on?
I'm just not getting into this. We are constantly updating. I gave the information that literally I gotten right before the show. The team is going to get everything out in detail as quickly as they can. If there's an hour lag or something, that's just part of a very complex dynamic where we got a lot of moving parts. But we're just constantly updating people. Anybody?
Yesterday, Frank Palladino of Local 1549 mentioned that there are 500 officers on desk duty.
Ralph.
What's it, Frank?
Ralph Palladino.
Ralph. Sorry, thinking of someone else. Well, anyways, 500 officers who are on desk duty that they believe should be out in the field, and they should instead be replaced with civilians. There has been talk in the past about taking more civilians and putting them into the police department in the desk duty type of positions. What is your response to
Yeah, I'm going to see you and raise you. There's not been talk about it. There's been action. I was a believer when I was back in the city council that DC 37 was right about civilianization. We've done several rounds of it over the last few years. We can get to the exact numbers, but actually there's been a very consistent effort to determine positions that could be civilianized so those officers could get out to the street. If there's more that we could do, we want to do it. There's obviously a limit, but if there's more we can do, we want to do it. Anything over here? Going over here, again, we're going to take a break in a moment, and then we'll come back on more coronavirus. Go ahead.
It's Kathleen Culleton from Hatch. Yesterday, the family of Antonio Williams said they were going to be suing the NYPD for unedited footage of their son's death. I wondered if you